Hey, welcome to Gradwell, a limited series podcast that explores various ways the University of Michigan can support its graduate students in their journey to greater well-being in our everyday lives. Brought to you by Rackham Graduate School. Each episode will explore a different dimension of well-being by interviewing a resource on campus that can help you thrive a little better. I'm Sam Hobson, a Ph.D. candidate and a GSSA in Rackham's Professional Development and Engagement Office. My fellow grad students, it's time we start placing as much importance on ourselves as we do our work. You're worth the effort.
Well-being doesn't just happen to you, you have to cultivate it.
Hello. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about professional well-being with Kirsten Elling, Assistant Director of Graduate Student Career Advancement at the University Career Center. I'm excited to have y'all with Kirsten and me today. Okay, let's dive in. Kirsten Elling supports the career development of the university's Ph.D. students through one-on-one career counseling, program development, and delivery. She also consults and collaborates with Michigan faculty in support of graduate student career development. As a psychologist, Kirsten brings a holistic approach to the important work of helping students navigate their career development within the context of work-life balance and other important factors. She finds much joy in helping graduate students explore all of their career options, leveraging their networks, and navigating the search for both internships and jobs. Hi, Kirsten. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks again for inviting me to be here today with you, Sam. I really am looking forward to talking about this topic with you.
So, Kirsten, how did you get into the work of supporting the career development of graduate students?
My PhD is in clinical psychology, and so I actually started off in the mental health counseling space, working in a couple of different college counseling centers along the way. And I really enjoyed the mental health work with students. My first job was at the School of the Art Institute and their counseling service. And I also was the liaison for their career development office. And I really loved that synergy because often in my counseling work with students, lots of things came up. We were talking about their mental health and relationships, but inevitably that, sort of where am I going, in life, and career and work-life balance, like all of that would come into the mental health counseling sessions as well. So, I think they're very interrelated. So I found that I really loved the work with graduate students. It's such a important and pivotal time in your life, and you're making a lot of complicated decisions about your professional identity and what you want out of life and thinking about quality of life and all of these things. So I knew that I loved that work.
Although it seems quite obvious when you say it, the idea that our sort of professional trajectory is very sort of interwoven within our mental health as graduate students, I don't think is necessarily something that we talk about enough. That a lot of the time it's mental health, emotional health, but not necessarily what this episode is about, the professional dimension of well-being and our mental health and how sort of what does the future entail for us specifically as grad students, specifically within our professional realm, and how that then influences our mental health currently, right now, right here. So I am taking notes.
Yeah. And I feel like these conversations about, sort of what am I going to do with my degree? And it's you never do that in a vacuum, right? Like everyone's considering all of these other pieces of who you are and, family and partners and just location and work-life balance. And I think also what can be layered about it is that your sense of what you want out of your career can evolve and change during graduate school, right? I certainly meet with a lot of students who maybe started off thinking, I'm going to be a professor. And then they change their mind along the way for any number of reasons. And sometimes they feel really good about it. And other times it feels like, I had pictured a certain identity for myself. And now I'm going in a different direction. And that's just a lot to process and unpack.
Yes, that really resonates with me as a person whose professional trajectory has shifted drastically from when they entered. I get it. Yeah. And I think that it would have been really lovely to have spoken with you as I was going through that existential crisis of like, who am I? What do I do? Because it's not necessarily what I thought I wanted to do and what I thought I was going to do. So I'm really glad. And I think that we're really fortunate to just have you and have access to your department for those types of conversations.
Yeah, thanks. I think the other thing too that can be really complicated in graduate school is that there's a lot of people who maybe have an idea of what you should do after graduate school, right? So, I mean, there's your own opinion, but your family may have some thoughts, or your partner may have some thoughts. Certainly your department and your advisor may have some thoughts about that. And so I remember sitting with that, like sort of, other people's agendas, and how do I navigate that? I had one moment, it was the clinical internship. I had applied to a site in Seattle that was a very prestigious site, and the grad studies director was really encouraging me to pursue that. And I had gone out and visited, and it didn't feel like the best fit, and it would have been farther away from family. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I don't know that I really want to uproot right now and go somewhere into a pretty intensive 1-year internship away from my support network. And it was really hard because there was pressure for me to take that Seattle internship. And I ended up sticking to my guns. And actually, I don't really like that metaphor. I ended up just following my instincts and going with the Chicago internship and staying like close to my network of friends and my support network and my family. And it wasn't the easiest thing to do to like navigate those other agendas.
Yes, I can only imagine. Kirsten, I'm super proud of you. That's hard. That no is hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially when there's power dynamics.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a hard no. And that's been a growth edge for me, like the no at various points in my life. So thank you for that. Yeah.
You're so welcome. Okay, so Kirsten, as the Assistant Director of Graduate Student Career Advancement here at the University of Michigan, what does well-being mean to you?
Yeah, I love that question. No surprise, as a psychologist, I do have a very holistic view of well-being. I mean, I like the Wolverine Wellness here on campus is a great resource, and they think about well-being in 8 dimensions. So including professional, but also physical, spiritual, social, emotional, financial, et cetera. I think they're all interrelated, right? And so it can be, if you're not taking care of your physical well-being, it can be hard to function professionally, right? So it's all connected. And I guess the other thing when I think about well-being is there's a proactive element to that, right? So life happens, there's things beyond our control, but well-being is about, we have to have some agency in that, right? It's about taking care of ourselves that we do have, agency over. I think it's, the accumulation of intentional caretaking of ourselves. Well-being doesn't just happen to you. You have to cultivate it. And I mean, I say that recognizing that external and systemic forces can be a lot to push against, and also that the playing field isn't equal, right? Like people are dealing with different levels of adversity and challenge. But I think the place where you have agency is that you can always be asking, where do I have agency? What resources do I need? What aspects of my well-being are challenging right now or are being challenged? And how can I seek help for that?
I really like your conceptualization of well-being as something to cultivate, as something I think, and I like the shift that you made, but it's not necessarily that you made, but that I heard in my mind from like our responsibility to something that we have agency over, that we get to be sort of an active participant in, that responsibility feels daunting, but like agency feels really empowering. And the idea that our well-being is within our control and we have agency over how well our being feels.
Yeah. That means a lot to me. That's landing as empowering with you, because I think that's when I think about just my approach to any counseling work that I do, that's always like really in the forefront of my mind, right? Is that I want this to be an empowering experience. I want students to leave a session feeling empowered because they have more knowledge or more tools or more support or more resources, whatever it might be.
In our attempts to allow our students listening here to feel a little more empowered in their professional well-being, we don't often hear necessarily about professional well-being. We spoke about this a little earlier in sort of the larger well-being narrative. What is professional well-being and how does it relate to graduate students?
Certainly, some of the key components are job satisfaction and meaningful work, work-life balance, job security, income, also that organizational culture, the relationships, you have with your colleagues. Those are some key aspects. What's interesting about sort of professional, like, well-being for graduate students, I think there's sort of a two-pronged, it's about there might be something in a given job that you have. So say you're, an intern for a semester or a year. So there's things about that and, your relationship with your supervisor and the work and the workload and all of that particular experience. So that's part of it. But there's also this just sense, and this is why I enjoy talking with grad students so much about this, but there's also this like setting yourself up for what comes after graduate school. So there's a bit of a, maybe with the grad school, there's kind of a short-term, long-term aim.
What I hear from you is sort of this need for strategy, not only a short-term, long-term game, but also we are likely in at least two different sort of professional spaces concurrently, right? We are graduate students, and that is a professional space that is leading us to a different professional space, but also, like you said, GSIs, GSRAs, etc. And that is also a different professional space that we also have to navigate and keep in mind. And it feels a little like a lot. The short term, long term, the multiple
Yes.
spaces at once, and
Yes.
also with all of the other work that we have to do. And so what do you recommend? I know we'll get into more. Here are the tips and tricks, but just to make it so it seems a little less daunting right now as we continue on with our conversation, how can we make professional well-being a little more easeful with sort of all of the multiple components that it seems to require of graduate students?
I think one, you're right, it is a lot. It's a lot. And I have big empathy for that. I think one thing is, even though there is this short term, long term that I talked about, like you need to get through the moment, right? And so I think about now kind of looking, retrospectively at some of my experiences in graduate school. And I wasn't always, or even, I didn't always have the capacity to think about long term, but I think that there were lessons that I learned even in the short term, right? What do I like in a supervisor? What's more challenging? How do I communicate to a supervisor about, what I need out of an experience, or when I have questions, or when I have support, or when I have an idea? Like, I think that if you, with each experience, pause and reflect, and I think this is part of well-being, is reflecting, but the end of a semester or the end of a year, pause and reflect about like, what worked for me about that experience? Gosh, I had a great relationship with that supervisor. What was it about that? Oh, we had a personal connection. We had really regular communication. It was safe to go when I had a question, like I knew I would be supported. And that can help like, well, what am I looking for in the future? And so I guess there's an iterative nature to it that if you reflect, you'll then be really positioned to make the next decision and have it be a good one. Because it's a series of decisions, right? Like, not like you have to have your whole strategy figured out right away. But if you reflect, I think then you can make those decisions that are good for you, whatever the next decision might be.
I really appreciate your emphasis on the iterative nature of it. What I'm hearing is that we have the opportunity, instead of treating this as sort of a daunting, I need to know everything right now, but instead experiencing this as an opportunity for data collection, where we get to learn more about ourselves. And this opportunity here, and if anything, like this is a really special moment in our lives that the majority of the population does not get to have access to, like this amount of data collection, where we get to learn so much about ourselves in these multiple different realms, and with the short-term, long-term game as well. And so to see it, just to put a different spin on it in a way that makes it seem really fruitful and abundant, instead of maybe like a daunting sort of task to overtake.
I love that framing of data collection. And you're right. And it's this abundance of experiences. That's a wonderful reframe. But yeah, data collection, that's a great way of putting it. I also, as you were talking, it reminded me of another kind of pressure point that I see with grad students. And that's kind of at end of degree when students are looking for a job, whether it be tenure track or, beyond the professoriate. But I think part of like in a PhD program, you see your professors who've been often at an institution for a very long time. And I think this can put a pressure of like, I need to find like the perfect forever job out of grad school.
Right.
I see that. And I think that is, you can sort of buy into that without even thinking about it, but that's a lot of pressure. And the truth of the matter is that people often have multiple jobs, especially early in their career. So maybe you do a postdoc or maybe you don't, but you had an internship that you really loved. So then you go into a similar organization and you try that out for a couple of years. And it is iterative, and that's okay. Like you can sign up for a job, take that job, try it for a couple of years, learn a lot from it. And maybe you learn that you want to continue in that direction, or maybe you learn that you want to do something else. But I think that can be very freeing. And so there might also be like a job that it's not perfect, but there's a lot of really good elements. And gosh, I could learn X, Y, and Z from this. And thinking of jobs as stepping stones too.
Okay. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
This is a journey and not an outcome that we're seeking.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Kirsten, you have a PhD yourself. And so we spoke about this a little earlier. You know that there's an ethos around being a grad student that sends the message that our work should be our entire lives. I remember getting to grad school and there seemed to be this energy that we're all just supposed to be too busy. There's always work to be doing, research to be researching, going to brown bags, presenting our papers, attending conferences, thinking about our work when we're not doing our work. How does this unspoken expectation affect our professional well-being?
I remember the culture really well, and there would be like even a competition of like who's the most stressed and who has things that are due next week. And it's not healthy. And I think this culture, it neglects that like whole person reality. So, and I think eventually when you do that, you're not as effective as a professional if you haven't been nurturing other aspects of yourself.
Mm-hmm. What can we do about this expectation? It comes from all sides, from our colleagues, from professors, from family, thousands of miles away. Grad school's hard. We're supposed to be working all of the time, right?
I was thinking of my own experience. I did buy into that culture. I showed up. I was like, oh, this is graduate school. This is a whole nother gear compared to undergrad. And I just remember stacks and stacks of reading. And I just thought, okay, well, Friday I come home and I need to just start with all the reading and I just need to work all weekend. That's what I need to do to keep up. That did not go very well for me. I think I tried that for the first, month or two. And I was just like, I was not happy and I was not well. And then I was really fortunate. There was a friend of mine and he said, let's start doing like Friday dinners together. Anyone who wants to come to my house, do a potluck. And so I think I didn't go to the first one or two because I was like, oh, no, I got to start my reading. But what I was realizing after trying that for a little while was that like I could not absorb anything else on a Friday night after like really busy week of all kinds of things. Like I would try and read and just nothing would stick. It was really inefficient and I didn't have a community, I was homesick. Like it was not a good thing. So I started going and those dinners were just what I needed. It was connecting with people. We just shared good food. We just talked about other things besides graduate school and got to know each other. And I found that I was then much more able Saturday morning to work. I was like, okay, I've connected. I've
Mhm.
nourished some aspects of myself. And now I can read and absorb what I'm reading and think more clearly.
I think maybe that's just a rite of passage, it seems, that we need to go through. I went through the same thing in terms of like, yes, working all the time. And then just like, this is utterly unsustainable. I cannot do this. I will not do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so maybe there's no sort of magic bullet, as people say, of ridding yourself of this expectation besides going through it, going and experiencing the unsustainability that this expectation places onto us, and then just learning to let it go.
So I had said yes to those dinners because of that like social connection and sharing food. But what happened is in our cohort, so we became more of a team, right? And we all had different strengths. One person was better at statistics and someone else was better at assessment and someone else was really great at research methodology. And so then we started to say, okay, we've got a big stats test coming up, like let's study together. And so because we were starting to connect on that personal level, we just started relying on each other to get through the program. And looking back, I think those relationships were so important to getting through the program. And it was part of ultimately it related to professional well-being because we learned a lot from each other. So it's always interesting to me how taking care of like one aspect of your well-being can influence others. So something else that I did that was really, it felt kind of radical at the time because I've always made art and been an artist. And in undergrad, I really, nourished that and took art classes and stuff. And then I got to grad school and I just sort of felt like would be seen as maybe frivolous by my professors, or I just didn't really broadcast. That was something that I did. And I really didn't create any time for it. And then I realized, again, that was not really good for my functioning. And so I found a way to kind of keep writing and keep, making art, even if it was just a little bit of time, like I kept in touch with that. At the moment, it was sort of part of survival and well-being, but it actually helped me get my first job. And so for my story, and everyone is going to be a little bit unique, but for me, I was applying for a job at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in the counseling service. And I knew that one of the things that would set me apart was the fact that I had a great understanding and respect for the creative process and for what it is like to make art and put it out there. So that's not something I usually talked about in my other interviews for other places, but for the Art Institute, I did. Like it was in my application materials. I talked about it in my interview and I got that job. And I have seen that in other people's lives as well. So maybe it's like a social issue that you care about or an affinity group that you're part of, and then you end up getting leadership roles because you're involved in that and you care about it. And then later it helps you get a job because you now have some skills that set you apart.
I love that. That is very inspiring. What I'm hearing is just simply trust and know that there are no negatives to really honoring yourself, pouring into all of you. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Kirsten, with all that we've chatted regarding professional well-being, you work for the University Career Center.
Yes.
What are the specific ways that the Career Center can support grad students' professional well-being?
I think one thing that's really important, and I certainly hear from students how valuable it is, that we provide in our one-on-one coaching appointments just a safe, confidential space to talk about your career aspirations, questions about networking, concerns about work-life balance. I hear from students that it's so powerful to talk to someone who doesn't have an agenda, like we were talking about earlier. Like no agenda about what your career trajectory should be, that other people in your life may. So you can talk really freely about, I like the research, but I don't love this. And I think for professional well-being, to be able to really get in touch with you and your values and your work-life balance needs, like that's so important. So that's something also related to what I just said, but just helping students articulate their values and their work-life balance needs and how those may have shifted and evolved over time. And sometimes maybe it's just what setting do I want to work in? But I've also talked with a lot of students There's something about their life circumstance that's changed. So maybe, as far as like being partnered or having a family, and they didn't when they started grad school and now they do. So all of that I think can be very vulnerable to talk about, but it's very important to talk about. So that's a key thing for how we can support students' professional well-being. And then I think some more concrete things too, just helping break down like things like a job search, what are the resources? How can we help at each step along the way? What are the next steps? What's a good way to organize your plan? Answering questions about the timeline, right? So students come in usually with a pretty clear idea of like, okay, for an academic job, they know what the timeline would be, but for industry, it can really vary. And so just answering those questions, demystifying, helping you like formulate a plan, that can be, again, very like a relief and also I think empowering. So then students leave feeling like, okay, I know what to do. And here's my first step. And then after my first step, if I want to come back and have another appointment, I absolutely can because it's data gathering, right? And then also just related to that too, sort of the options, like we were talking about just that, like often students come in, especially doctoral students, thinking about there's just a very narrow career path and a professoriate and not being really aware of what else there is. Like I'll listen to someone's experiences and their skill sets and what they have liked and not liked about graduate school. And it always gives me ideas of, have you thought about this setting or that setting? Or, some people come in with some clear ideas of some options and others just, they don't know. And that's okay. Open up. What are the options? I think can feel very, relief and empowering. There was a Ph.D. Connections conference, which I co-chair. And the purpose of that conference is really to show what are the different options, right? So we always bring in Ph.D. alumni from different fields and, have them talk about their career trajectory and their jobs. And again, I hear from students, they're like, wow, I just didn't realize that there were so many options. And it makes me so happy when I hear those comments. And so again, just feeling like you have possibilities and options, that's just I think really important for professional well-being.
That's wonderful. I wish I had known about your one-on-one counseling as I was going through my existential crises of, I guess this isn't what I wanted to do. What do I do now?
Yeah.
That went on for years and I'm currently still on the tail end of, if I'm being honest.
Well, we're here for you.
Thank you. I will be setting up an appointment.
Yeah.
And I hope that others who are listening, if they have the need, or even what I really appreciate about what you said is just the space for exploration. Like you don't have to know. You don't have to have any set determined outlook or trajectory or know what you want to do or even know what you like. This is just a space for an outside perspective to be able to, someone who's not so close to the data, to look in and say, well, maybe this or maybe that. I hope our students listening will be able to take away sort of just like the abundance and possibility that it seems like the Career Center can offer.
Yeah.
Thanks. Kirsten, when I was doing research on professional well-being for graduate students, a lot came up about our relationship with our advisors. How do you think that relationship plays into grad students' professional well-being?
I think this is one of those examples where I would say be really aware of the resources and find agency where you can. So Rackham has great programs to help grad students get, their relationship with their advisors off to a good start. So the Mentoring Others Results in Excellence, that program they have, they're educating faculty, they're educating students. There's a lot of tools to help the advisor and the student, talk together. So there's a lot of support for that. And so I think part of it is about like knowing where those supports are and then being proactive in like, you deserve to have a healthy relationship, and a productive one. And so like, what does that mean for you? What do you need from your advisor? And the more that you can talk about that and articulate that, the better. There are tools and supports for that. Because I know that's easy to say, but it can be intimidating. But there are ways to get support in that. And then I also think that I always like to let students know about the Graduate Student and Program Consultation Services, GSPECs. If there are issues that are challenging that students are trying to navigate, you don't have to do that alone, right? There are supports. There are people who have expertise in helping you navigate those relationships. I wanted to give a shout out to the Rackham Doctoral Intern and Fellowship Program. There's advice about how do you talk to your advisor about doing an internship, right? That could feel kind of scary to talk to my advisor. I'm not sure what they're going to think about it. You don't have to do that alone. There's information, there's people to talk to that can help guide you in that process. I think when I started grad school, I didn't really think about the resources that were available to me as a grad student. I guess I sort of thought, well, okay, in undergrad, that was okay for me to take advantage of resources.
Yeah.
But now I'm like supposed to be really a grown up now, and I should just be able to do all this stuff. And I don't know where I got that idea, but again, that's not sustainable. And there's so many resources at the U of M. And so like tap into those. Reach out if you have questions, reach out if you're struggling, reach out before you're struggling, right? So if you have questions, that's a great time to reach out. And then maybe you won't even, kind of get to the point where it's really a struggle or a challenge.
So we've learned a lot about professional well-being, how it can contribute to how we show up as graduate students. What are some small things that us grad students can do right now towards improving our professional well-being?
I would say the small thing that you can do, which can really become like a big thing, is what I was saying earlier about community building and connection. So just like look for those opportunities to build community, whether it's within your cohort or other places. I think the other thing I wanted to say about just little things that you can do now is the networking piece. And I just say that because I often will work with students and they're like, networking, like, what is that? I don't know that I'm any good at it. Like, there's a certain vibe with that word. And so I always like to reframe it like networking is really about connecting. It's about building relationships. And so that's something that you can do along the way, right? So like just people that you're meeting in different settings or across campus or on your internship or alumni that come through the department. These are all people that you can be connecting with, even just for a little bit, and then keeping track of them. And if someone is maybe doing some interesting work at a nonprofit and you're thinking, I'd like to know more about that, you reach out to that person. Those kinds of things, maybe it's just a 20-minute conversation, but you can get a lot of information, a lot of inspiration from networking and sort of learning from other people about how did they navigate grad school, how have they navigated their career path. It can be very, very inspiring if you can connect with alumni, like recent alumni especially, and just see how did they navigate it and how did they get from grad school to where they are now. It can give you a lot of ideas about, I hadn't thought about that. And I think the other thing too, so that's one of those, again, it's a dual purpose thing where if you're networking and you're kind of keeping track of people that you meet, you're getting really great information that may help shape your career decisions, but you're also creating a support network too. Some of those people you may just talk to once and that's it, but other times you end up forming a relationship and now you have someone else kind of in your corner who's like, let me know when you actually start applying. I'm happy to look at your resume, or I'll let you know if I hear of any jobs. Like that kind of thing happens.
Yes, thank you, Kirsten. As a person who was very afraid of networking for a very long time, a switch that I made, just sort of a shift in perspective that has really helped. And I have to thank my partner for this. She's very good with connecting with others, is because a lot of the time networking feels like we're trying to take something from the other person, right? Give me something. Give me your time. Give me your energy. Give me your resources. Give me access somehow. And so my partner gave me the advice of instead shifting it to like, what can I give to this person? You don't have to come up with specifics, although those would be great, but just to offer, like, how can I support you? How can I be of service to you in some way? And it made it feel a lot less daunting and a lot more enjoyable of a process to connect with people and to offer myself. How can I pour into you in ways that you need? And yeah, it made the networking process just a lot more enjoyable.
Your partner is very wise. I love that framing. And I think I often hear from students that like worry that it'll be transactional. I'm asking for something. So yeah, what your partner said is just so true because a good connection and a connection that can grow is going to be mutual, right? And
Right.
so, and you, I mean, you have a lot to give. We all have a lot to give each other. And it's
Right.
easy to feel as a grad student that we don't have much to give. We're a student, but it's like,
Right.
you're a brilliant student here at the, but you have a lot to give. And when you start looking for the way that you can give, you're right. It feels better. And I think ultimately it leads to deeper connections.
Yes, yes. I really like what you said about how what we can give to others, we may not ever even realize until we sort of put ourselves in that moment. And B can look like so many things. Like, do you
Yeah.
know how to fix a bike? Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Or like you said, a recipe, or maybe you know somebody that they would be interested in, or you can offer. It doesn't have to look, often at times I think even, oh, if I have to give to them, it has to be in a very professional setting, in a very sort of professional sort of aspect. Like I need to have a resource or some type of knowledge or some type of connection in a professional way that they can benefit from. Otherwise, they cannot benefit from knowing me. And that is just, it took me a long time to realize or to accept and allow. But like you said, got a lot to give.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you summed it up really well. It reminded me of a grad student that I supervised. She was an intern a couple years ago. We've stayed in touch and, really enjoyed working with her. Well, she every year just texts me on my birthday.
Oh,
So sweet. It's so sweet, and I'm
yeah.
like, it's a very like small, might seem like a small thing, but it always makes me smile. I'm like, oh, she thought of me on my birthday. Like that's a little gift, right? So it can look many different ways, as you said.
Yes, I don't think we give as much honor to the small things, the little things that,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age when just relationships are even more difficult to sort of maintain. And we think that it needs to be some sort of like very grandiose type of, what is the word? When gesture,
Yeah. Right.
in order for it to make a difference or for it to be impactful. And no, like a text on one's birthday is so important,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
lovely.
Absolutely. These little moments of, like kindness or connection or a shared interest or saw this comic and thought of you. I mean,
Hmm.
like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Kirsten. Before we part, is there anything else you'd like to share with our community about professional well-being or just well-being in general for grad students?
Don't lose sight of what gives you joy or
Mm,
energy. You don't stop thinking about that. What makes you feel nourished? There's so many other parts of ourselves. And so it's going to look different for everyone. But is it, interacting with nature? Is it making art? Is it playing frisbee with friends? Is it gaming? Is it knitting? Is it cooking? Is it dancing? Is it reading poetry? Like, what is it? Some of these things might be something you do on your own, and others might be more community building. But I know how busy the life of a PhD student is. But if you find just a little bit of time to do something that brings you joy or energy or centers you or just helps you breathe, it can make a huge difference. And just that, like you have put it so well, but just that sort of that honoring, right, of we're all multifaceted people and continuing to honor that you are multidimensional, multifaceted, and you need to nurture all the facets. And even if you can't nurture a facet as much as you would like to, just to a little, like at least a little bit, like keep that
mm,
part of you alive. I think that's really important. The more you're a whole person, the more you're feeling balanced
mm,
and nurtured physically and socially and spiritually, like the more you'll be able to perform at your best, in your
mm,
academic and work endeavors. And I think also it's interesting because having been on the hiring side of things, many times employers will end up with a slate of very qualified people in their final interviews. But what makes you stand out? Like it's often those other
mm,
facets that
mm.
that you've nourished. So just honoring that whole person that you are, I think that's something that will feed all aspects of well-being and certainly will enhance your professional well-being.
Thank you, Kirsten. Oh, that resonates with me deeply. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all your great questions. I've really enjoyed talking with you. I was looking forward to this, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much for your time, so much for your wisdom, for your presence with us today. I'm really, truly grateful. It has been a joy. It really has.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few takeaways and something small that you can do right now, all of which are linked under this episode's resources on our website. 1, check out the Career Center's one-on-one coaching, where you can explore your professional potential in a space where nobody has any stakes in your career decisions. 2, check out all the resources created to help make your relationship with your advisor the best that it can be. And 3, don't forget that your professional well-being is connected to the other dimensions of your well-being. So make a little space for your intellectual, your emotional, your social well-being in support of your professional wellness. And something small that you can do right now for your professional well-being is to create an account on Rackham Connect, an online community where you get matched with Rackham alumni. It can help you step up your networking game in a really easeful way. You can find all of these links and more at rackham.umich.edu/Gradwell. And please email us with any questions at rackhampdeworkshops@umich.edu. Make sure to join us next time when I chat with Amanda Healy from the Ginsberg Center about social well-being. See you then. Hey, hardworking grad student. Thank you for tuning into Gradwell. I hope you can take something away from this episode with you. If you like what you heard, be sure to write a review, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, check us out on social at UMich Grad School.